Dawn descended heavily over State Highway 17, a damp and icy veil that stretched for miles through dense forest and cutting silence. The rain, fine and persistent, whipped the patrol car's windshield, transforming distant lights into diffuse neon blurs. Inside the vehicle, the air conditioning fought against the penetrating humidity, and the metallic smell of ozone hung in the air, foreshadowing not just the storm, but perhaps something more sinister. Sergeant Miller, a veteran with 20 years of service and a face marked by the night shift routine, kept his eyes fixed on the road. Beside him, Officer Ramirez, a younger face still optimistic, adjusted the radio, searching for some station that could break the monotony of that endless night. Suddenly, a flash cut through the darkness. A luxurious black sedan glided down the lane, its speed slightly above the limit. What really caught Miller's attention was how the car seemed to absorb the ambient light, almost camouflaging itself in the shadows. One of the taillights was broken, a minor detail, but sufficient to justify a routine stop. Miller activated the strobe lights. The blue and red beam cut through the forest darkness, painting the tree trunks with silent urgency. The sedan, after a brief delay that seemed to carry hesitation, pulled over to the muddy shoulder, its wheels sinking slightly into the wet earth. The two officers got out of the patrol car, their dark rain capes offering little protection against the cutting cold. Miller approached the driver's window, Ramirez the passenger side, his hand instinctively resting on his holster. The tension in the air was palpable, an electricity that transcended simple traffic violation. The driver's window rolled down slowly, revealing a middle-aged man with a pale and tired face, eyes fixed ahead. He seemed tense, hands firmly on the steering wheel, as if the simple act of letting go of control could trigger unforeseen consequences. Miller requested documents, his voice neutral and professional, but a familiar sensation ran down his spine, that premonition that always preceded major complications. While the driver nervously searched through the glove compartment, a sudden movement in the back seat caught Ramirez's attention. An unusual bulk, covered by a dark blanket, seemed to move slightly. The officer discreetly signaled to Miller, who immediately felt his pulse accelerate. The situation, which should have been trivial, was gaining unexpected and potentially dangerous contours. Miller instructed the driver to exit the vehicle. The man hesitated for an agonizing instant, his eyes diverting to the rearview mirror as if seeking some kind of guidance or escape, before slowly obeying. His hands trembled slightly as he moved away from the car, and the rain intensified, drumming on the sedan's metal roof and the asphalt like a sinister symphony. With extreme caution, Ramirez opened the vehicle's rear door. The blanket fell, revealing an inert form that froze them in place. It was a human body, a young woman with dark hair spread in disarray and eyes fixed in emptiness, a dark trickle running from the corner of her mouth. There was no doubt. This was a brutal homicide. The scene froze in time. The patrol lights danced over the newly discovered horror, creating a macabre kaleidoscope of colors over death. The driver, upon seeing the exposed body, expressed no surprise, only an icy resignation that was almost more disturbing than any emotional reaction. Miller felt the weight of the discovery like a punch to the stomach, the dark premonition confirming itself in a visceral and definitive way. The patrol radio began to crackle, the dispatcher's voice sounding distant against the shocking reality unfolding on the road. Miller, his mind already working in multiple directions, activated the emergency protocol, requesting backup, a complete investigation team, and the coroner. Each word spoken into the radio seemed to echo with the weight of a situation that transcended his previous experiences. The driver remained in absolute silence, his posture rigid as a statue, expression indecipherable. His hands, now handcuffed, hung inert at his side, and he seemed to have mentally withdrawn from the situation, as if observing the events from a safe psychological distance. It was at this crucial moment that a second figure emerged from the sedan. The passenger door opened slowly, and an imposing silhouette materialized from the vehicle's shadows. A man in an impeccable suit, despite the rainy night, with a haughty posture and a face that Miller instantly recognized from newspaper pages and television newscasts. It was Senator Caldwell. The air seemed to thin, and Miller's mind processed the information with terrifying slowness. The simple traffic stop had transformed into a nightmare of unimaginable political and criminal proportions. The presence of such a prominent figure from national politics at such a brutal crime scene completely altered the situation's dynamics. The senator maintained admirable composure considering the circumstances. His eyes swept the scene with calculated calm, and when he spoke, his voice carried the authority of decades in public life. "Officers, I am Senator Robert Caldwell. I am available for any necessary clarification, but I would like to contact my attorney." Miller felt the ground move under his feet. 20 years of police career had prepared him for many situations, but not for this explosive convergence of crime and political power. He knew that every move from this moment would be scrutinized, every decision questioned, every protocol tested. The arrival of backup broke the supernatural quiet of dawn, transforming the highway scene into an anthill of coordinated activity. Additional patrol cars, aligned with military precision, and a forensics van, with its distinctive markings and specialized equipment, parked with the efficiency of a surgical operation. Detectives from the Homicide Division emerged from vehicles with serious faces and calculated steps, their experienced eyes sweeping the scene with a methodology that transcended simple observation. Senator Caldwell's presence, however, hovered over everything like a cloud charged with implications, subtly altering the investigation's initial dynamics. Detective Sarah Chen, an Asian-American veteran from the Homicide Division, took command of the scene. Her 15 years of experience in complex cases made her the natural choice to lead an investigation of this magnitude. Chen was known for her meticulous approach and her ability to navigate the turbulent waters of politics without compromising investigative integrity. "Miller," Chen said, approaching the sergeant, "I need a complete briefing. Every detail, from the moment of the stop until now." Miller reported the events with professional precision, but Chen perceived the tension in his voice. Experience told her that cases involving prominent political figures were minefields where careers could be made or destroyed based on decisions made in the crucial first hours. Forensic experts, equipped with state-of-the-art equipment, began the meticulous collection of evidence. Every square inch of the black sedan and surrounding area was examined under the relentless light of specialized lanterns, searching for microscopic fibers, fingerprints, or any trace that could narrate the story of those final moments. The victim's body, now carefully protected by a white tarp, awaited the arrival of the coroner's team. The precision required at this stage was absolute. Any procedural error could irreversibly compromise the investigation's integrity and consequently any future legal proceedings. The victim's preliminary identification revealed surprising information. Sarah Jenkins, 28 years old, biotechnology researcher with a brilliant academic record and a promising career at a cutting-edge company, graduated summa cum laude in biochemistry from Stanford University, with a doctorate in molecular biotechnology. She represented the type of scientific mind that could revolutionize entire research fields. The preliminary autopsy, performed with the urgency the case demanded, revealed disturbing details. Sarah's death had not been instantaneous. She had succumbed to blunt force trauma to the head, but coroners identified clear evidence that she had been subjected to a period of physical restraint before the fatal blow. Rope marks on her wrists and evidence of struggle suggested she had resisted, fought for her life before being brutally silenced. This discovery shifted the crime's epicenter from the highway to an earlier location, a space where violence unfolded over an extended period, adding a layer of premeditation that wasn't clear at the initial scene. The murder had not been impulsive, but calculated and executed with a coldness that chilled the blood of even the most experienced investigators. Simultaneously, the digital analysis team dove into Sarah's electronic data. Her cell phone, a state-of-the-art smartphone, was subjected to complete forensic analysis that revealed a complex web of recent communications. There were calls and messages exchanged with high-profile figures in the corporate and political world, a network of contacts suggesting involvement in large-scale projects. Even more intriguing was a pattern of encrypted messages with an unknown number, communications that seemed to have become active in the last 3 weeks. Deciphering this data proved to be a formidable challenge, a race against time to uncover secrets hidden in sophisticated digital protection layers. The substantial absence of any digital trace from the driver, identified as Arthur Hayes, was itself an intriguing fact. In an era of ubiquitous connectivity, where practically every human interaction leaves digital footprints, Hayes's almost complete absence from cyberspace was an anomaly that raised questions about his true identity and purpose. The initial interrogation of Arthur Hayes revealed a man prepared for this moment. His responses were measured, devoid of genuine emotion, as if they had been rehearsed multiple times. Hayes claimed to have found Sarah already dead in the back seat of the car, a story that sounded artificial in its precision. "I just follow orders," Hayes repeated with robotic consistency. "My employer, Senator Caldwell, instructed me to pick him up at the airport and transport him home. When I arrived at the vehicle, the woman was already there, already dead." The absence of stuttering, contradictions, or signs of nervousness that usually accompany improvised lies suggested prior preparation or unusual psychological resilience. Hayes maintained direct eye contact, his hands remained stable, and his breathing stayed regular. All signs of someone extremely controlled or completely dissociated from the situation. Senator Caldwell, in turn, demonstrated formal but carefully distant cooperation. Accompanied by a team of lawyers who arrived with suspicious speed, he offered his version of events with the precision of an experienced politician navigating turbulent waters. His narrative painted the picture of a man exhausted by a tiring trip who had fallen asleep in the back seat after an exhausting day of political meetings in Washington. He insisted on being completely oblivious to the macabre events unfolding just inches away, a claim that, while technically possible, stretched credibility to its limits. Flight records corroborated his presence in the Capitol hours earlier, and testimonies from his security team confirmed that Hayes had picked him up at the airport as arranged. However, the almost robotic precision of his responses and the absence of any genuine sign of shock or sadness over the death of someone who was in his vehicle raised silent skepticism among investigators. Chen observed every micro-expression, every pause, every word choice. Her experience told her that both Hayes and Caldwell were concealing crucial information, but determining exactly what and why would require a much deeper and more complex investigation. The situation's complexity deepened with the legal and political implications. Interrogating a sitting senator required a differentiated protocol, a delicate dance between the urgency of criminal investigation and the constitutional safeguards that protect elected officials. Each question needed to be carefully formulated, each procedure meticulously documented. Forensic analysis of Sarah Jenkins's personal computer revealed an investigative goldmine. Her files contained months of meticulous research on financial irregularities in government infrastructure projects, with particular focus on a highway expansion megaproject that had been the central political banner of Senator Caldwell's most recent campaign. Sarah had discovered evidence of bid manipulation, systematic overcharging, and public fund diversion on a scale that could reach hundreds of millions of dollars. Her files contained copies of modified contracts, communication records between corporate executives and government officials, and financial analyses that mapped money flow through a complex network of subsidiary companies and front entities. Even more revealing was a specific dossier that Sarah had compiled on the Caldwell Infrastructure Consortium, a group of companies that had won substantial contracts in the highway project. Her research suggested that the consortium was, in fact, a coordinated operation to maximize profits through fraudulent practices, with the knowledge and potential participation of high-level political figures. The discovery of substantial financial transfers between accounts linked to the consortium and a series of obscure consulting companies painted a picture of systemic corruption. Sarah had mapped these money flows with the precision of a forensic accountant, creating a visual web of connections that revealed the true scope of the criminal operation. Particularly concerning was the discovery that one of the consulting companies, Vanguard Security Solutions, had been contracted for specialized security services related to the project. The vague nature of this description, combined with the exorbitant amounts paid for the services, suggested activities that went far beyond conventional security. A deeper search into Vanguard's records revealed connections to Elias Vance, a former Special Forces operative who had transitioned to the private sector after a military career filled with classified operations. Vance was known in intelligence circles as someone willing to accept contracts that others would avoid, a specialist in solving delicate problems for clients with substantial financial resources. Investigation into Sarah's personal files revealed that she had attempted direct contact with investigative journalists and government transparency organizations in the weeks prior to her death. Drafts of unsent emails suggested she was planning to make her discoveries public, an action that would certainly have devastating consequences for everyone involved in the scheme. The discovery of a warehouse registered under Vanguard Security Solutions' name led the investigative team to an abandoned industrial district on the city's outskirts. The location, officially listed as a security equipment depot, proved far more sinister when examined closely. Hidden surveillance cameras, communication interception equipment, and a room that had clearly been used for interrogations provided physical evidence of operations that transcended any legal definition of security consulting. Even more disturbing was a monitoring system that had tracked Sarah Jenkins's movements in the weeks prior to her death. Recordings recovered from the surveillance system showed Sarah arriving at the warehouse on multiple occasions, always accompanied by figures who remained carefully out of the camera's reach. However, more detailed forensic analysis of the images allowed partial identification of at least two individuals, Elias Vance, and surprisingly, a familiar figure from the police department itself. The most shocking revelation came when image analysis identified Division Chief Harding in the recordings. Harding, a respected officer with decades of impeccable service and mentor to many in the force, including Miller himself, appeared clearly in conversations with Vance that were obviously not official or legal in nature. The discovery that Harding possessed undeclared investments in several companies linked to the infrastructure consortium completed a devastating picture of corruption that extended to the highest echelons of the police force. Financial records revealed that Harding had received substantial payments through a network of shell companies, all connected to Caldwell's highway project. For Miller, this revelation was a personally devastating blow. Harding had been not just his superior, but a mentor and father figure during his career. The idea that the man who taught him about police integrity was deeply involved in a network of corruption and possibly murder was almost impossible to process emotionally. The documentary evidence was irrefutable, Harding had used his position in the police force to provide privileged information about ongoing investigations, had manipulated procedures to protect consortium interests, and had facilitated the elimination of obstacles to the criminal operation. The pattern of his actions revealed a man who had systematically betrayed his oath and public responsibility for personal financial gain. The atmosphere at the station transformed dramatically as the investigation deepened. Conversations would abruptly stop when Miller approached. Important files began to mysteriously disappear, and crucial information got lost in inexplicable bureaucratic procedures. The resistance wasn't open or confrontational, but rather subtle and systematic sabotage. Miller realized he was being isolated within his own institution. Colleagues who had previously been friendly became distant. Superiors who used to trust his judgment began questioning his decisions, and resources necessary for the investigation became inexplicably unavailable. The message was clear. There were powerful forces working to protect their interests, and Miller represented a threat that needed to be neutralized. The threats materialized gradually, beginning with seemingly accidental incidents that could be easily explained. His personal car's brakes mysteriously failed during a routine trip, forcing him into an emergency stop that could have been fatal. A mechanical investigation revealed signs of deliberate sabotage, but there wasn't sufficient evidence for formal legal action. A break-in at his residence followed a strange pattern. Nothing of value was stolen, but his house had clearly been searched by professionals. Personal files were examined, his computer had been accessed, and there were subtle signs that every room had been meticulously inspected. The violation of his privacy was psychologically devastating, an invasion that brought the threat to the heart of his family life. His wife, Karen, began noticing unknown cars parked on the street, and his teenage daughter mentioned seeing the same man in different locations during her daily routine. The Miller family was clearly being monitored, an intimidation tactic designed to constantly remind him that his obstinacy in seeking truth put at risk not just his own safety, but also that of his loved ones. The psychological pressure was relentless. Miller began questioning every shadow, every car that followed him too long, every unidentified phone call. The stress of constant surveillance began affecting his sleep, concentration, and ability to make clear decisions. He knew this was exactly the intention, to break his resolve through mental and emotional exhaustion. Chen became his only trustworthy ally within the system. As an investigator from outside Miller's immediate circle, she had escaped the influence network that seemed to permeate the department. Together, they developed security protocols to protect evidence and communications, knowing that any information shared through official channels could be compromised. The final analysis of Sarah Jenkins's encrypted communications revealed the complete extent of her investigation and the mortal danger she represented to the criminal operation. Her final messages, sent to an investigative journalist from a major national newspaper, contained sufficient evidence to completely dismantle the corruption scheme and send dozens of important people to prison. The messages revealed that Sarah had initially been approached by consortium representatives with a substantial bribe offer in exchange for her silence. When she categorically refused and threatened to make her discoveries public, the situation quickly escalated to direct threats against her safety and that of her family. The digital diary hidden in her personal belongings provided an agonizing chronicle of her final weeks. She documented forced meetings with Elias Vance, where project irregularities were discussed openly and where she was coerced into maintaining silence through increasingly explicit and violent threats. The diary's final entries revealed that Sarah knew her life was in danger, but she remained determined to expose the truth. She had implemented security measures to ensure her discoveries would survive even if something happened to her, including backup copies of all her files sent to multiple recipients through program delivery systems. The decision to murder Sarah was made when it became clear she could not be bought, intimidated, or silenced through other means. Vance was hired to solve the problem permanently, a task he executed with the professional coldness of someone accustomed to eliminating human obstacles. The final confrontation with Harding was inevitable. Miller knew he could no longer avoid the reality of his mentor's betrayal. In a private interrogation room, away from curious ears, he presented the evidence he had collected, giving Harding an opportunity to explain his actions. Harding didn't deny his involvement, but tried to justify his actions through a distorted logic of economic necessity and opportunity. He argued that the scheme's money could finance legitimate infrastructure improvements, that the ends justified the means, and that Sarah was a naive idealist who didn't understand the complexities of the real world. "You don't understand, Miller," Harding said with disturbing calm. "The system was already corrupted. We just found a way to make it work for our benefit." Sarah Jenkins was a threat not just to us, but to the entire project's stability. Her death was regrettable, but necessary. Miller felt a mixture of disgust and sadness that transcended any previous experience. The man he had respected and admired for decades had revealed himself to be a monster capable of justifying murder for financial convenience. The corruption wasn't just financial, but moral and spiritual, a rot that had completely consumed the soul of someone who once represented integrity. The exposure of the corruption network triggered a chain reaction that echoed through multiple levels of government and society. The arrest of Elias Vance, carried out when he was trying to leave the country with falsified documents, provided the final link in the evidence chain. Under intensive interrogation and confronted with irrefutable evidence, Vance eventually confessed his participation in Sarah Jenkins's murder. Arthur Hayes, the silent driver who had maintained his facade of innocence, finally broke when confronted with Vance's testimony. His confession revealed that he was more than a simple employee. He was an active collaborator in the operation, responsible for transporting evidence, facilitating clandestine meetings, and ultimately assisting in the disposal of Sarah's body. Senator Caldwell, despite his best legal and political efforts, could not completely escape the consequences. Although his direct participation in the murder could not be proven beyond reasonable doubt, evidence of his participation in the corruption scheme was overwhelming. He resigned from the Senate in disgrace, facing multiple federal charges related to fraud and corruption. Harding was arrested in his own station, a public humiliation that reverberated throughout the entire police force. His arrest served as a brutal reminder that corruption can infect even those who swear to protect and serve. For many officers, especially those who had respected and admired him, his fall represented a crisis of faith in the institution itself. For Miller, the case's resolution brought bitter satisfaction. Justice had been done for Sarah Jenkins, but the personal cost was immense. His career in the police force was effectively ended. Although he wasn't officially dismissed, he was transferred to a remote station where his investigative skills would be wasted on minor bureaucratic tasks. The retaliation was subtle but effective. His promotion opportunities evaporated, his resources were limited, and he found himself isolated from colleagues who saw his pursuit of truth as a betrayal of the police brotherhood. The price of integrity, he discovered, was frequently professional loneliness and institutional ostracism. Chen, on the other hand, was promoted and received national recognition for her work on the case. Her position as an investigator external to Miller's immediate circle had protected her from the political repercussions that destroyed Miller's career. She became an advocate for police reform and investigative transparency, using her experience in the Jenkins case as an example of the dangers of institutional corruption. Months after the case's resolution, Miller patrolled rural roads in a small station, far from the centers of power where his career had flourished. The change was humiliating, but also liberating in a way. He no longer needed to navigate the political complexities of urban life or question his superiors' motivations. The experience had fundamentally changed his perspective on justice and law enforcement. He understood that true police integrity didn't reside in blind obedience to hierarchy or institutional loyalty, but in the willingness to confront corruption wherever it manifested, regardless of personal consequences. Ramirez visited him regularly, bringing news from the department and offering moral support. The young officer had been deeply affected by the events, his faith in justice simultaneously shaken and strengthened by the experience. He saw both the human capacity for evil and the power of individual integrity to make a difference. "Was it worth it?" Ramirez asked during one of his visits, a question that echoed Miller's own uncertainty. Miller considered the question carefully before responding. Sarah Jenkins had a family who loved her, dreams she'll never realize, scientific discoveries that could have benefited humanity. She died because she chose to do the right thing, even knowing the risks. If we don't honor that choice by seeking justice, what kind of society are we? The memory of Sarah became a source of strength for Miller. He carried with him a photo of her that had been published in the newspapers. A smiling young woman at her graduation, full of hope and potential. She represented all victims of corruption and abuse of power, all those who are silenced for daring to challenge unjust systems. The investigation also revealed the importance of trustworthy allies and collaboration between different agencies. Chen had taught Miller that the fight against corruption couldn't be fought alone, that it required networks of individuals with integrity willing to support each other in the face of adversity. The Jenkins case established important legal precedents for future investigations involving high-level political corruption. The investigative techniques developed by Miller and Chen became models for other departments, and the security protocols they implemented helped protect future whistleblowers. 2 years after the events on State Highway 17, Miller reflected on how a simple traffic stop had irreversibly altered the course of his life and career. The experience taught him that truth has a price, that not everyone is willing to pay, but that for those who choose to pay it, the reward is the preservation of their moral integrity and the satisfaction of knowing they made a difference. Sarah Jenkins became a posthumous symbol of the importance of government transparency and whistleblower protection. A foundation was established in her name to support researchers and investigative journalists who risk their careers and safety to expose corruption and abuse of power. The Highway Infrastructure Project was completely restructured under new leadership and rigorous oversight. Although it was completed with delays and significant additional costs, it became a model of transparency and accountability in large-scale public projects. Miller continued his police work with a new understanding of law enforcement's moral complexity. Each patrol, each investigation, each decision was informed by Sarah Jenkins's memory, and the knowledge that true justice requires courage, sacrifice, and an unwavering willingness to do what's right, regardless of consequences. The road that stretched ahead of him, both literally and metaphorically, was full of possibilities and challenges. Miller drove forward, carrying the weight of experience, but also the strength of conviction. Justice, he had learned the hard way, is not a destination to be reached, but a journey to be traveled daily, a choice to be made repeatedly, a flame to be protected against the storms of influence and corruption. The truth had cost dearly, but Miller knew that the price of ignoring it would have been infinitely greater. He continued his vigilance, knowing that somewhere on some dark road, other Sarah Jenkins would need someone willing to fight for them, and he would be ready.